This morning we have Reverend Schuyler Vogel, our senior minister here at Fourth Universalist Society, and Soyal Smalls, our director of membership and hospitality. Again, they have not seen or know of the questions that I am about to ask. And first of all, I want to start by thanking all of you who did submit questions, of which there were many. So you're a very curious bunch. And that's what Unitarian Universalism is all about, asking the question. So you're really good at that. You may not hear your question asked this morning. I've tried to group them in objects or questions in topical. So, but certainly if you have a question that you haven't had answered, make sure that I know at the end so that we can make sure that Schuyler will have an opportunity to answer that in a different time. So we begin with something that is on our mind, and the question is, how can we continue to find faith and hope when our country and world is in such a turmoil? So I want to start with minister number one. I want to start with you, and actually I also would like you to answer how you personally can find faith and hope when our country and world is in such turmoil. So what do you have for us, and what do you find for yourself?
Sure. That's a great question. It feels like it is the question of the moment. The world looks really troubled right now. You look at the news, and it's one bad thing after another, and it isn't exactly clear how things will work out in the end for the good, which is not great. It's not great for the soul. It's not great for our mental health. One of the things there are two things that I try to do, both for myself and that I think are maybe helpful frameworks for all of us. The first is to remember that we are not the first people in history to go through troubling times. I think I was going to be a history teacher. That was my pre-minister plan. And you can look at any history book, and there's lots of examples of people looking at the moment of their life and saying, wow, things look dark right now. And that's true in this country, it's true across the world, throughout the centuries, things look dark. And in those moments, there's darkness, but there's always light and goodness there too. And so remembering that we are not the first people in history to go through times where things look bleak. And there is comfort in that. And there's comfort in knowing that there are other people who we can consider our kin, our inspiration, who are deeply troubled and despairing, and that they were there and that we are here now, and that life can get better despite the dark time. And the other thing that I would just say in dark moments is that even though things look dark, there are always good things to celebrate too. I look at Reddit occasionally, and there's a Reddit subreddit, if you follow Reddit at all. I don't know if you do, but there's a part of that where there's like a subreddit that's about good things in the news. And lo and behold, there are things that people can post that are good, that are happening, things that laws are being passed, progress being made. They're not always the things that make the news. They're not always an impeachment trial that isn't going to go anywhere. But there are good things that are happening. And so making sure that we're attuned to the positive, to things that are beautiful days outside, to birthdays to celebrate, to newborn babies who offer hope. There are good things, and those things can help us get through the dark times and carry us through, because if we lose hope, then the fight is lost. And so we have to make sure to take care of ourselves, our own mental health, our own soul, that we don't forget that hope is possible.
Number two.
All right. So I'm coming from an artist background. So one of my jobs, I'm a puppeteer, do puppet theater, art, music, performance. So people find creativity in times of darkness, and they're able to process some of that despair in their artwork. I mean, even looking at this building itself is in a Gothic style. So people are trying to process a dark time and a dark experience, and beauty comes out of that. And I think just like recognizing that we as a people, like we're very resilient. and just looking at the tools that we have in ourselves to be able to be here today. What are our strengths? So what allows us to get up in the morning and go to work? We're not staying at home. So just giving yourself that appreciation for being strong. Humans are very strong. So yes, you're going to see a lot of terrible things out there, but we're a lot stronger than we give ourselves credit for. And then one of the other things, like being somebody that practices earth-centered spirituality and is married to a farmer, sometimes when you think that you're in a dark place, you're just being reborn, or you're coming into a new time. So maybe you're a seed that's being buried and you're about to be sprouted into something that's blossoming into new growth. So it's just changing your perspective on what you think is negative or bad.
Okay, thank you. So Minister number 2, Soyal, we're staying with you for this next question. Many of the problems in our community stem from loneliness, isolation, not being heard or seen, and individualism to the point of exclusivity. Doing the work or actively sharing our religion with others, those outside of our church doors, should be a part of our desire to build a more loving and accepting world. So as the Director of Membership and Hospitality, how can we as UUs change the negative connotations associated with proselytizing and instead use our community to bring people in and further the experience that we share here?
What I do is, I think it's not so much about preaching the word, which some people do, and there's like a distance in that. You're trying to build connection, you're trying to build community. And so I try to, reach out and get to know people and have conversations. And oftentimes people share a lot of UU values and they don't realize it. So there's a lot of questioning and a lot of open dialogue, and you're not pushing it upon people, but you're slowly drawing them in and showing them that there are parallels and that there are connections to this belief system or this way of being together and looking at different ways of viewing the world and having perspective and having those conversations. So I don't think that we're going out saying, this is who you need to be and you need to be here, but where are you at in your journey, and can we have a conversation about that? And what do you like? And would you enjoy being in a choir? Come check out our choir. Do you enjoy serving food? I love food, and I enjoy serving food, so maybe you want to hang out and serve food with me. So really just, be yourself, be genuine and be yourself, and don't think of it as trying to necessarily recruit people. Just get to know people.
That's beautiful, thank you. So basically sharing what we're being here out in the world and inviting. Okay, thank you. Schuyler, Minister number 1, here's a question that I have as well. Thank you to the person who asked this one. How can we prioritize, in quotes, when UU beliefs differ or oppose law, such as humanistic caring for undocumented immigrants versus the laws that we have and the need for border security?
So is the question about when we break laws or when do we oppose laws?
How can we, like as a Unitarian Universalist, how can I say, which should I prioritize? My need for humanistic caring or the reality of the laws that exist?
It's a great question, and it's a question that UUs and other people of faith for centuries have wrestled with. When does what we feel is right, if it conflicts with the law, what do we do with that? Our tradition and my belief is that laws are human-made, which makes them fallible, which makes them subject to mistakes and poor planning. Laws are made by people in power to serve people in power, more often than not. We see this in our political world today, where a great example of this, I think, is where you You look at the trade agreements that we make. Well, who is in the room with those negotiators making those trade agreements? Are they the labor unionizers? Are they the undocumented farm workers who are pushing those negotiators to look out for the people in the fields? They're the CEOs and representatives of the large corporations. So the laws that we have are designed to serve certain people. That's why lobbyists can afford to send people to Washington, why campaign finance laws are so important, because the people who they're designed to represent are not being represented. So our duty as people of faith, as people of conscience, is to trust our gut and ask, who are we serving? Who is our God? Even if we don't believe in God here as Unitarian Universalists, what is our most important commitment morally? Is it to a law made by people who are connected to power, or is it to the people themselves, who are vulnerable, who are often suffering, and who are often on the margins? Our job as citizens of this country, I don't believe, is to serve whoever just happens to have the power and the wealth. We're not obligated to serve them. We're obligated as people who care about each other to serve each other. And if that means housing undocumented immigrants in this church, we do that, even if the law made by the powerful says we can't. And that's why we're a sanctuary congregation, why we have taken a family in the past, and we will do it again if we have to, and we will do other things that contradict the law of an unjust country until the laws are just and people recognize that humanity matters more than power.
So, different question for you, Soyal. In addressing what's in our society, homophobia and racism, there are, I'm combining basically three questions here, which is giving the religious history of homophobia that came from Christianity, that we hear from Christianity, and also the ways in which it's sort of a long established experience to have racism and homophobia in our society. What can we as members of the congregation do to work toward doing anti-racist and anti-homophobia work in our community and in our day-to-day life?
Part of the work is research. So when, don't just take sound bites. So some of the things are, okay, if there is a religious text that has information in it that supports homophobia, supports racism, where, at what point in time was that written? Why was it written? What, question that text, question the situation, and question who was it, like, what was the propaganda behind it? Because there's always reason behind those words and why those groups of people were put out. And maybe you can draw a similar, maybe you can draw a parallel to what's going on today. Are there messages in text that are happening now that are attacking a certain group? And we can try to figure out a better way to address our own history in that. Because we don't have to hold, we have to acknowledge our history, but we don't have to hold it as our current truths. So always just research where that information is coming from and why it was said. And you're going to look at the work that you have to do as an individual. So like if the work that you're going to do as a white person to address racism is going to be different than the work as a person who is of the suppressed group, of a person of color, as a Black person. There's different roles that you're going to take. Person who is cisgendered, who's straight, there's different work that you're going to do than someone who is part of the LGBTQ community. And you're going to learn from each other. And part of it is to be able to have these conversations that are not comfortable for anyone, but just to be honest and open and figure out together how we can move forward so that we're all being treated like human beings. I think at the bottom line is, how do we treat each other like human beings?
Thank you very much. Okay, so we're going to take a brief break. Okay, Schuyler, minister number one. As a minister leading prayer, does it make you feel uncomfortable when you see atheists open-eyed staring back at you? What is spirit of prayer and meditation mean? Signed, a curious atheist.
Ah, very good. I always keep a long list of like potential sermon ideas, and one of them in my list recently has been like, we should talk about prayer. So this will be like a snapshot of that sermon whenever it happens. So I as a minister, me personally, I'm probably an agnostic humanist myself, which for those of you who haven't been to a Unitarian Universalist congregation before might seem strange or weird, but in this community, in this faith tradition, atheists and theists go hand in hand. There is no hierarchy of belief, which is a lovely thing, but it does make it complicated sometimes when you see Jesus up here, or this feels like a church where people believe in God. And they did, and they said lots of prayers when this church was founded. And so things like prayers are tricky, and it's complicated. So for me, prayer, and as someone who is a humanist and an agnostic, if I had to label, prayers are not so much requests to anything out there. I'm not speaking to a thing that I expect to hear me, although if there is such a thing, that's fantastic. I'm happy to have all the things that we say here heard and then brought into life. You will hear our prayer later on if you haven't heard it before. There's a calling up of what I hope concerns, feelings, emotions, questions, a lifting up of the human experience that articulates for me what matters, what is on our hearts, what needs to be said that's unspoken. And so for me, a prayer is not necessarily to anything. It is an opportunity for us to pause in an intentional time together and sit with our feelings and name our feelings and express them, because sometimes it's really hard to do that outside of a worship service. And so for prayer for me is a chance to express what is inexpressible otherwise, to look into your heart and say, gosh, this is what I'm feeling, and I bet other people are feeling that too. And that's a powerful thing to do, and we don't do that enough in life because it feels weird. And especially if you're an atheist asking that question, it doesn't have to be about God, it just has to be about needing to express something that's deep within you that feels really real, but doesn't feel like it's taken shape yet. And together we can all hold those feelings and make them real, and make sure that none of us feel alone, that we feel like there's still hope and love in this world. And prayer is an expression of all those yearnings and longings that we have that maybe we can't bring anywhere else in our life.
Thank you. So, yeah, here's a question for you. When language of songs, especially those that are strictly male, offend me, what should I do?
I recently went to a worship associate training, or worship training for Unitarian Universalists, and we talked about songs, and we talked about words of songs and lyrics, and whether you should change the words because you found offense in them. So I grew up in a UU congregation in which many humanists, atheists, were very uncomfortable with the use of God, and they changed all of the hymns that had God in it and replaced the word God with something else. And later in this workshop, we talked about copyright, and we talked about the intention of what the composer had, what their intention was, why they chose the words they chose, and so there's something behind an artist and why they're choosing the words they use and what they're putting out there, and this is their work. So just think about that a little bit. So yes, there's going to be some pieces of art that you might find offensive. Some people don't like naked statues, and they'll put leaves on them to make them more appropriate or more appealing to the eye. And so I think that everyone's going to have a different sense of what's appropriate, what's offensive, especially given their life circumstances. So I guess my answer would just be to kind of reflect, have some time for self-reflection, and think about what it is about the song and the words that is bringing up these feelings of offense, and what the message is and what you believe the message is being said to you. And then we can probably definitely have a conversation about some of the hymns. Some of them aren't sung in congregation, but they're definitely there for discussion, deeper discussion. So maybe it is a song that maybe we wouldn't want to sing, but I would definitely open it up for discussion, but also self-reflection.
Thank you. Schuyler, how can different religions all be okay under UU? This person has had a difficult time explaining to others how this can be, and have simplified it to, well, if you live by the 7 principles, you can be a UU. So how is this possible that all the different religions can be okay under UUism?
That's a great question. And what I would say is that not all religions are okay under UU. We are a pluralistic, interfaith, non-creedal religion. We have long roots going back 200 years. But it doesn't mean that anyone can just be a member here or consider themselves UU, or that all religions are, or expressions of religions are equal. And I say that with the caveat that religions are deeply complicated and they're deeply diverse, and there's many different expressions and warped versions of them. So we can look at Christianity as we live in a country that is dominated by Christianity, right? This is a country that was large part founded by Christians, where Christian culture dominates this country, dominates our politics and our culture. There are versions of Christianity in this country today and historically that, as Unitarian Universalists, we aren't okay with. The forms of Christianity that exclude our LGBTQ siblings. We aren't okay with that. We're not okay with those versions of Christianity that tell women that they need to stay in their place. That's not a religion that I can get behind, and Unitarian Universalists can get behind. We're not okay with versions of Christianity that support white supremacy and racial hierarchy. And so when we say that we embrace all religion, what we're saying is that we are welcoming of a religion that understands the 7 principles and honors that. 7 principles, if you haven't seen them, I encourage you to look them up, Google them. We have them posted around. They sound like, if you're a liberal progressive person, they sound pretty simple. All inherent worth of dignity of all people. Well, that sounds nice and simple. Of course we like everyone. But all those versions of Christianity, and there's versions of Christianity in Islam, in Judaism, in Buddhism, it's not a Christian thing, it's a human thing, right? That people can be excluded based on who they are. Unitarian Universalism stands against that form of religion. It's a form of fundamentalism. It's a form of power, consolidating power in the hands of a few. We're not for that. And the principles are pretty clear about those things. If you can't believe in the inherent worth and dignity of a person, that form of Christianity or Islam or Judaism or Buddhism or whatever, Unitarian Universalism is going to push back at you and say, that's not a religion that we believe in. And so we are a huge open tent. But if you can't play well with others and acknowledge the human dignity of every person, it's going to be really hard for us to be with you in fellowship, because you deny the humanity of another person. And if you do that, we're going to have an issue. So we are a welcoming, happy place, I think, and yet we do stand for something. We side with people, no matter who they are, what they believe, within bounds.
Thank you. Sayal, again, as our Director of Membership and Hospitality, to what extent does 4th U exist to serve the needs of the members versus the needs of the community or society at large? And how do we strike the right balance?
Awesome question. So I went to a young adults racial justice conference in Louisiana, New Orleans. Amazing time. If you haven't been to New Orleans, go. And that was a huge question that we asked of each other, how much of the work of the congregation is outside of the congregation. If there are issues that come up socially, what is our work to do? And is this just a social club that we have? And we put a nice little name on top and call it something that sounds good. So I'm not gonna put a number on it. Don't know how to do that. That's like doing 23andMe. I'm 23% Irish and 15% Scots. So, but I think that in this community, as a Unitarian Universalist, as a member of Fourth Universalist Society, as a friend of Fourth Universalist Society, we all have our different roles, and all our work matters and it's important. So I come from a collaborative mindset, so I don't think that there's any work that anyone's doing that's more important or has more weight. So I think that the work that we do within our congregation for each other is important, whether you're a member or whether you've been visiting for a long time, whether you're married to a member. I think that the work that people do here outside in the community is really important and shows who Fourth Universalists are and their relationship to the community, because we are the neighbors. We have our neighbors, and this is the space that we have, so it's really important to be out there and to have a presence. And it's important to be in relation with other UU congregations. People are visiting from all over the United States who share our faith tradition. So I think it's all of it. So there's no one group that should be served over another group.
Thank you. Okay, and finally, the other question that I know is on everyone's mind. This is for Schuyler. How's the roof project coming along?
Yes, the roof project. So you have seen the scaffolding is up, which is fantastic. If you look, last time I've checked, the best view of the roof is if you go out that door, cross the street, and look on this side, you will see a roof that is almost finished with new, beautiful Vermont slate. That is wonderful progress. They're working every day. We had good weather, except for yesterday, but they don't work. Maybe they work on Saturdays. We're working on it. It should be done in the spring, assuming all goes well. And you never know what's under the roof when you dig under there, and you hope that nothing is rotten. And so far, everything has been good. So that's a really lovely thing, because it could be a lot worse. And then we can start looking towards the future. We talked when we started the roof project that it's a bit like we're down in a valley looking up at a mountain, and it's really hard to see what's beyond the mountain when the mountain's there. But if you move the mountain and get rid of it or squash it, the roof is the mountain in this case, you can start picturing what else we can do, right? And so there's like practical stuff like we can repaint this sanctuary, which hasn't been painted in decades. We can rework the stone. We can renovate the offices. My office just got painted because we can paint it now and not have to worry about it leaking all over the place. To other things, what are we going to spend our money on when we have the loans paid out? Do we want to hire a second minister? Do we want to fund a social justice staff person? These are big questions that once that mountain is gone, we can really all start exploring together. And that's exciting because it's not just a roof. It represents something that has been in our way for a very long time and threatened the prosperity and the future of this place. I mean, 2 years ago, we weren't sure whether we would be in this location because we didn't know if we would succeed in raising $1.5 million. And through your help, we did, and through help of our neighbors and through the great work of our staff getting a grant. But there was a tipping point there. We take it for granted. You take for granted that we did it, but We could be moving up to Washington Heights 2 years ago. We didn't know. So here we are. We're stuck, and now we get to decide what we want to do with this beautiful building that continues to grow and live out its ministry here.
Thank you so much. Thank you, both of you, for answering these questions.
Thank you for your
Today.
questions.
Okay. So here at Fourth Universalist, we take an offering each week. We do this to not only support our beloved